Let me sit down here too. You can sit. Okay. Oh, that mic is off. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, go. Duckling. Hello, duckling. All right. Good break?
Yeah.
All right. Well, okay. Let's see. What's a good intro? Oh, I never did the who you are thing earlier. It's probably helpful.
Sure. Yeah, we could do that.
Oh, you said you didn't necessarily want to go too much into projects, etc. What about a general, like, the fields you're currently engaged with or something like that? Somewhat vague, right?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Just the basics of who I am and what I do.
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Well, hello again. Good break.
Hey.
Perfect. Sitting with it's Ryan Hopkins.
Yes, sir.
Just to give a small intro, what are the fields you're currently most engaged with or interested in, without divulging too much information publicly that might be sensitive? And
Well, in general, I'm an engineer, professional draftsman. I have this year will be going on 20 years in the manufacturing trade, particularly mostly doing drafting and mechanical design in a wide variety of different fields and environments. Some of the things in particular that I'm interested in have to do with precision mechanics and electromagnetics. And I've had kind of a deep interest in particularly in electromagnetics and material science for many years. I'm essentially an autodidact. I'm mostly self-taught. I don't have a college degree, although I do have I do have drafting certificates from a trade school, and I started to work in that trade after I was complete with trade school, and I've been essentially doing that ever since.
most in engineering and labs, etc.
Yes.
Design.
Well, not so much labs per se, but it's been a wide variety of things from design to manufacturing to quality control, quality analysis, and quality control, which really just means measuring things accurately.
Yeah, down to that precision again.
Yes.
Well, okay. So to start off, I know relatively early on in these interests, you had come across Mark Tomion's work
Yes.
online. So yeah, around when was that? And then what part of his work piqued your interest at the time?
Well, I came across Mark's work around 2003, 2004, and I'm pretty sure I came across it either on J.L. Nowden's site or the Rex Research site. And I thought it was very interesting because, for starters, it was patented, and the American patent system is not set up for people to succeed in general, but in particular, because of the Invention Secrecy Act, there's always the danger that the federal government or one of the military services will just take your patent if they determine that they can use it, which is like a pipeline towards weaponization, basically, and gag orders for the inventors. Like, oh, this is nice. Hey, by the way, we can use this so you can never talk about it again and never work on it again, or we'll throw your ass in jail. That's a powerful demotivator.
And that a lot of that was from, or they use the Atomic Energy Act or something, right? To just to kind of whatever they deem appropriate to hide. So there's thousands of patents, I believe, that are classified that aren't necessarily needing to be.
Yeah, and many people have talked about this. Greer has talked about this. Thomas Bearden has talked about this. It's a known thing now. It's not even a secret anymore that each of the military branches has a representative at the patent office, as well as probably each of the intelligence agencies, and they can scoop up anything they like. So.
And this is related also to the difficulty of speaking about it even in public with just other people, even if you're not going into business or private invention of devices, even just discussing the theory and the observations and experiment with people in typical academic fields is difficult because of the elasticity, shall we say, necessary to the flexibility to look at things in a different way when you've kind of been used to or told something so much for so long and basic fundamental science principles, etc.
Right.
We're talking about gravity, electricity, and magnetism mostly.
Right.
When it comes to basic understanding of things like this invention, and one other important thing we were talking about wanting to mention is people have been talking about engineering the vacuum or zero-point energy in mainstream engineering, especially going back several decades. So this is not something new, and the suppression and the threats and killing of people in the field has been going on for about as long or longer, right?
Yeah.
Mark Tomion.
So it's amazing.
2003 or 4. Sorry, go ahead.
It's amazing to me, firstly, that he obtained a U.S. and international patents, but nonetheless he did, and I think part of the reason was because of the way he worded the patent, particularly the introduction, and the line in the first sentence saying, requiring suitable means of input torque, because that X's out any question as to whether it's over unity or whatever. There's this whole facade of what we were told is physics, which is really a small portion of the overall view. And there's been this whole amazing body of work that has occurred over the past 100 or more years, much of which has been suppressed or just ignored or fallen by the wayside. Who wants to have to go through stacks and stacks of library books to find one little nugget of information they might be looking for? It's just not. The science on which this is based is not taught as being a reality. It's not even taught, particularly in the United States. There's quantum mechanics and there's classical mechanics and relativistic mechanics, and there's this big divide between them. And then with another, seemingly unrelated topic, there's this conception that ball lightning is not well understood. Its formative mechanism, its mechanism of stability, but that's not actually valid. what is actually the case is that it has been very well understood, particularly over the past 30 years. And we have overwhelming proof of that in academic journals and like on the books publications going all the way up to the United States Air Force studying plasmoids under the propulsion directorate of the Air Force at Edwards Air Force Base.
Yes, Phillips Laboratory.
Yeah. This was the paper that Bob Greenyer showed during one of his weekly presentations just recently, and it's absolutely extraordinary.
Jack Nachamkin, I believe. Sorry if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Jack. I believe he still publishes.
Oh, that's great.
Yes. That paper is over 30 years old.
And it's force-free time harmonic plasmoids,
yes.
right?
And then we can link to that one too. You had brought up something I'd wanted to mention, but I can edit in a comment to overlay and post. Well, okay, so back to Mark Tomion.
Sure.
And would you mind giving me a basic elementary level run through of what the machine is or the potentials of the machine or the possible implications of its function?
Sure. So first and foremost, a ground-based stationary high voltage electric generator could be produced, which would be well suited for particular applications. One of the main applications that Mark had in mind was for desalination, and for industrial processes, industrial heat or high quality process heat to drive chemical processes. This would be a provider of electrical and thermal, high quality electrical and thermal energy on demand, with an input power required that is a small fraction of its overall output power. And so that is to say that it is a massive degree over unity.
Producing excess to what to the input.
Yes.
And a degree of magnitudes, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay, and then
moving forward from the electric generator, what Mark intended to be the full build out, so to speak, of this device would actually turn it into a ship, a ship that can use very intense electrical fields around itself to propel itself and to control its trajectory and speed. And it's interesting, actually. Later in the book, Mark even went so far as to create a star map with a series of plans for traveling to all the stars in our nearest, or in our stellar neighborhood, and plotting the distances and times involved. And there's even a part where he describes the startup of what he intended to be the largest ship of the series, because another very important aspect of what he did was that he defined a scaling factor, so that you can make a 4-foot device all the way up to a 110-foot device, and that device, which he nicknamed a Toltec class vessel, would take about an hour and a half to start up, and he conceived it as being the reasonably largest feasible device of this kind, because of limitations in rotor tip speed and mass. A 110-foot vessel would be extraordinarily difficult to build properly for starters.
Is it is it a materials and a manufacturing type of a handicap or a limit, or is it both? Or
I wouldn't call them handicaps or limits per se. It's just a matter of how much, money you want to throw at it. But essentially, what Mark said about it was that at that time he estimated it would take about $250,000 to build a 4-foot, a fully fledged, what he called a 3N, and we can get into what that means later. A fully outfitted 3N 4-foot device, which he called the Badlander class, which would be the drone, so to speak. It would be the first full test, remotely operated, of a device that would actually use the field propulsion. So you'd use that for the very first testing campaign, beyond the series of work it will take to get to a stationary power generator, and so that testing campaign would involve, fully building the machine on the 4-foot scale, and then building a facility to test it at, and it would be an iterative process to build each next size up, because of the volumetric scaling. The cost balloons greatly, and so Mark himself admitted that he would probably need government level help to do the last, but still very significant engineering challenges in order to complete a workable engineering design. So like he got
for the 4x4 foot one.
Yeah, which is the gateway to all the others.
Right. That would be the minimum, the MVP or minimum viable product for the ship once the generator were.
Yes.
But is a almost inevitable extension out from the generator's technology?
Well, yes, that too. So he spent
real quick
a large chunk of his life working on this magnum opus, and barely anybody noticed.
And we're talking about his book, Stardrive Engineering?
Yes, the book and the patent, which is by itself an extraordinary 36-page tour de force that will turn your brain into jelly. But once you even just reading the intro really gives, for people who are savvy, it will give you pretty much everything you need to come to a conception of what it is and what it can do.
Okay, well maybe that would be a good intro into the more intermediate part of this video.
Sure.
So Ryan is going to expand a bit to help along those who are able to hear. I'm going to be left in the dust, but don't worry about me.
Well, Paul, I just want to mention briefly, I did want to say that I am very thankful to you for doing this.
Oh, absolutely, my pleasure.
And it really is an honor on my part to be able to espouse this in such a way that some people out there might actually gain an interest in it as well, because I think it's an important part of the mosaic of science that has largely been kept from our eyes
for one reason or another. Yeah.
or fallen by the wayside, or whatever the case may be. So
one aspect we didn't mention with the suppression, etc., is discrediting, like in the case of Fleischmann Pons, etc.
yes,
Just to add that in real quick.
yes, and that's probably the best example, which is analogous to the examples of people who have talked about UFO phenomena for years and been, ruthlessly slandered to the point where they've been driven insane or worse. And I think it's important to understand the not to be funny, but the gravity of the situation in that regards, because we do stand on the shoulders of giants, and many of these giants not only gave their best work of their lives, but they also gave their lives for this. So it means something. Because we are all deserving of the best advancements of science. It's at the core of what science is really about. Is advancing and improving our condition, and by extension, the condition of our brothers and sisters. And there's been far too much of this Operation Mockingbird, where people are mocked in public for espousing ideas that don't follow the convention and the standard orthogonal view of what physics is and what it entails. But as you know, and as I know, the view is much greater than what we were initially told and taught. And in that sense, it's not really, it's not the teacher's fault. It's not the fault of the people who write the books.
Right.
It's not even the fault of the theorists. If they are prevented by means known to them or otherwise from going into certain research areas and actually uncovering the facts of the matter, then how are we to ever know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a many-headed beast. The gradual, enlightening is maybe too strong a word, but just the gradual education, re-education that needs to take place. Because a lot of these inventions we're talking about, you talk about the fractal toroidal moment, the EVOs or charge clusters, ball lightning. They say natural phenomena, and phenomena makes it seem like we know less than we do about it. But no one owns this. And Bob Greenyer will say things like, anyone who studies nature closely will eventually figure it out. So it's not it's just how there's so many ways it can be used and utilized, that there's a lot of options and a lot of applications.
Yes.
I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah.
So just to kind of, I guess, close out that part, that interlude, to drive home the gravity of the situation, Mark Tomion died in 2009 under suspicious circumstances. And I'm just going to say that because it is what it is. There was supposedly he was ill at the time, and supposedly he slipped on his floor and hit his head on the corner of a table, which split his head open, and he bled out while he was passed out and died. Well, he was found 3 days later with the doors still open, and he was face down. And most of the time when people slip, they slip back, not forwards. In any case, this was right on the heels of him finally starting to talk more openly about the free energy and over unity aspects of the device. There's no way I can tell for sure. But in my opinion, his death was suspicious, to say the least. And part of why I'm still doing this is for him. And whether or not he's on the list of the over 100 years of dead inventors that were talked about in the very good documentary, The Lost Century and How to Reclaim It, this work deserves its place, and I think it really stands on its own as far as its uniqueness with regards to the patent record and with regards to the science involved and the timeline that he did this, the time that he figured this out, is really extraordinary.
One aspect I wanted to mention before we go on to the slightly more advanced technical stuff is in the patent, you had mentioned how you were surprised the patent was awarded and not, either suppressed or stolen, etc. But one of the interesting aspects is the ambiguous statement you read where sufficient means, and the patent office thought that was plenty because I assume he had to present what sufficient means might be enough evidence that they would allow that wording, or maybe they even required that wording over something more specific. I guess that's a lot of...
I don't think the patent office required that wording per se, but it was included in order to completely stop any further questions as to what the driving source is, as to what the prime mover is in this device.
Because that was not the... he didn't want that to be the focus.
Right.
Yeah.
So he basically said that this device requires a suitable means of input rotary torque, and just left it at that. He didn't expand on it, saying, it has to be electric motors, or it has to be a steam engine, or it has to be, it can be whatever.
I think I cheated a little too. I don't know if we've read it yet. This new...
Yeah. So this is the abstract of Mark Tomion's patent, which is US 6404089B1. And the title is Electrodynamic Field Generator. This device is a brushless high-voltage electrical generator requiring suitable means of input rotary torque for purposes of producing a very high-energy external electrodynamic field or continuous quasi-coherent DC corona or arc discharge of uniform current density, which completely encloses the machine's conductive housing. And I'll just leave it at that because there's quite a bit more to the abstract, but that really says quite a bit just by itself. So it produces a field that completely encloses the machine's conductive housing. That's a key part of it.
It envelops the housing?
Yes. So if the housing is the hull, then it completely envelops the hull.
Which allows for some interesting interactions, field interactions?
Yes. So it really all has to do with producing and controlling the field envelope and its characteristics and shape. So in this device, which is maybe characteristically saucer-shaped. There's what Mark described as a bihemiToroidal field, which forms. And so if you have your disc-shaped craft, you will have half of a torus, or a bulged half of a torus on the top and the same on the bottom.
Kind of like a four-leaf clover looking thing?
Yeah, if you look at it in cross-section, it looks somewhat similar to a four-leaf clover. And so if the field halves, if the power in the field halves is equal, it'll hover. But if the one on the top is made slightly weaker than the one on the bottom, or the one on the bottom is made slightly stronger than the one on the top, you get what Mark exactly described in the American Antigravity interview as a net thrust vector along the axis of the craft.
American Antigravity being Tim Ventura's organization publication before
Yes.
Alta Propulsion or APEC. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes. So it's a fairly complex. It's a very complex device, but it can be understood in stages, and it can be understood through analogy, because the analogies that I use so I say that the electrodynamic field generator is a combination of four existing technologies, and they are the Faraday disc dynamo, the vacuum tube, the Tesla coil, and the cyclotron. And the reason I say that is because each one of these technologies is incorporated into this one device, and it greatly advanced from the prior art.
So they kind of synergistically combine into this.
Yeah, there's a combinatorial optimization that occurs in the combination of these several systems together. So there are a variety of parts of the system, and each of those parts or subsystems can be analogized to those four devices, because they are a version of those devices that's optimized for a particular purpose on this device. So in general terms, what I could say about that is the field envelope is similar to that produced in some ways is similar to that produced by the field of a Tesla coil, the electrostatic field of a Tesla coil. The way that power is conducted across the rotor comes exactly from the thermionic principles at work in a vacuum tube. So the Tesla coil, the vacuum tube, the Faraday disc generator is essentially the disc itself, although it is a greatly enhanced version of the very simple original. And then lastly, the cyclotron, which also has to do with the field envelope. There's an aspect of the field envelope that actually relates to what he called the quasi-coherent discharge that has to do with the cyclotron equation. And it refers to a portion of the field where the passing field current, or the passing charge sheath of electrons, is recirculated onto itself. And this is done by a ring of armatures on the top and bottom, which also interact with the rotor. But they create a magnetic field that allows you to, as Mark said, smooth out or smear out the intensely random discharge. So you're using the magnetic field to sort of make the discharge behave and not arc over, and only screen through that area the electrons that are moving at a fast enough relativistic speed to create pair creation above the Schwinger limit at the attractor caps on the top and bottom. And that very intense appearance of virtual electron-positron pairs, which then annihilate, creates a pure ambipolar thrust force on the caps, which leads to the very intense push along the axis that you get as a result, as long as there's a field differential between the two halves
of the bihemi-toroidal.
Yes.
Did I get that right?
Yes.
The
bihemi-toroidal drive field or field envelope. And also he kind of, I should go back into that also because it really is descriptive.
Yeah, please.
He basically described it. He described the field envelope in 3 different ways successively. So first, he calls it a very high energy external electrodynamic field. And then he calls it a continuous quasi-coherent DC corona. And then he calls it an arc discharge of uniform current density, which completely encloses the machine's conductive housing. So he's trying to give 3 aspects of what it is, or 3 versions of descriptions of what it is. And I thought that was very revealing. It's very revealing of his method also, because he approached each aspect of the problem in a multitude of ways to try to verify that he was getting to a solution that could really work.
It reminds me a bit of other researchers and scientists who, like you had touched on a little bit in a conversation about how there's a lot of separation between like people working in different favored methods of measurement, for example. So there's authors who will approach the same idea from all those different aspects to give everyone or more people a path in. But then while you're doing that work, I guess you also verify the information if it just translates directly with math to a different measurement system or something like this. Sorry, an interjection.
That's okay.
I hope it didn't derail you.
No.
You're on a roll.
Well, so one of the things about it is that this thing would be very. It would take an intense professional engineering effort and theoretical effort to arrive at an engineering basis by which you can achieve a real star drive with which we could really visit Alpha Centauri and our whole stellar neighborhood. And I think one of the most extraordinary things about what Mark did was that he actually based it on on very good previous work. And one example of that is actually this. This is the work of Dr. William J. Hooper from UC Berkeley. And this paper is called New Horizons in Electric, Magnetic, and Gravitational Field Theory. Dr. Hooper presented a body of work that cannot be ignored. It exposes the truth of the motional electric field and its direct connection to gravitation, which could be verified by any serious physicist who would want to do so. And I'm sure there would be plenty of funding available for that. The watchers or listeners are going to have to be somewhat comfortable with what the convention views to be heretical ideas. So one question you might have is, where do we go from here? Like, what would be the next step? And I think that it really would be the next step is to find other people who have a serious interest in this topic and who are familiar with the fact that it's not it's not science fiction, it's not hypothetics. Like there are large volumes of work that we can point to and refer to, and hopefully we will do some of that with links and such.
Absolutely.
So that people can actually see that, like, this isn't bullshit. This is real.
Yeah, and not
Hooper proved that the motional electric field is real, and Mark Tomion expanded upon it by bringing it into the relativistic realm. So it's the relativistic motional electric field, which is, as Hooper says, literally the electrogravitational field. So what happens then if you have a craft, a ship, that can produce gravitational fields that move relativistically? So Mark's work was inspired by and partly based on Hooper's work.
Okay.
And so that's a very important pretext for it. But there are others also, and this is another good example. So this is, I'm pretty sure this is a book by Thomas Minderle, and this is relatively recent. This is 2014. I wish I actually had the title here, or maybe it's on one of the pages. But so this,
we'll get it.
Just the abstract of this. He says, the forces of magnetism, electricity, and gravity are distortions of a single primordial field that permeates the universe and comprises the fabric of existence. Vorticity in this field gives rise to magnetic fields. Dynamic undulations give rise to electric fields. Compression or divergence gives rise to gravitational fields. When put into mathematical form, these relations reveal how electric and magnetic fields can be arranged to produce artificial gravity and many other exotic phenomena such as time distortion and the opening of portals into other dimensions. And I know that a lot of people, especially on that last line, will be like, bullshit.
Stargate's sci-fi.
Yeah, but I would suggest as an interjection of another reference here, Fer de Lance by Colonel Tom Bearden, because that really lays out what some of the inspiring possibilities are, but also the reason why we need to not weaponize these things, like certain countries already have, and actually, maybe have a moratorium, a worldwide moratorium on scalar electromagnetic weapons, with an economic push like Rosie the Riveter to bring this technology out peacefully for all the creative uses it can be used for to improve our lives, the lives of our everything in our biosphere, to clean up our act and finally get it together. We need to learn the real electromagnetics and the real physics which have been kept from us
for thousands of years.
By hook or by crook, by forgetfulness or by purpose. There is a wide body of evidence of all of this stuff, and it only takes an interested person to look even just a little bit beyond the surface, and you're like, whoa.
And this might help us live a little more in harmony with our planet. And
yes,
it's many spaces and environments that it graciously allows us to inhabit. Sorry, please go right ahead.
I'm just looking through the glossary of this particular book, and it's really telling just the names of the stuff. So maybe I'll just read it really quickly. So introduction, basics, math terms, physics terms, symbols. 2, potential fields, scalar superpotential, magnetic vector potential, electric scalar potential. 3, force fields, electric fields and a sub of electric singularities, magnetic field and a sub of magnetic similarities and superpotential of a magnetic field, gravitational field with subs of vector potential function of gravity, superpotential function of gravity, and gravitational flux. 4, force-free potentials, potentials without electric fields, potentials without magnetic fields, potentials without gravitational fields, superpotential without potential field, in summary. And then 5 is gauge freedom. I guess they're missing the list under gauge freedom. So 6 is wave equations, which detail derivation from Maxwell's equations, transverse waves, longitudinal waves, displacement current, electrogravitational potential, the nature of charge. And then 7 is the last one, which is relativity, time dilation, ambient gravitational potential, Mach's principle, uniform velocity, time dilation and scale contraction, acceleration and inertia, circular motion, and conclusion. So this is just to show that multiple authors, multiple researchers have come to the serious conclusion that there's a link between electromagnetism and gravity, and that means as a natural consequence that gravity can be engineered.
Most people haven't even heard the term of a gravitational wave, let alone a high frequency one or something like this.
Yeah.
So the idea of engineering the vacuum or the zero-point field, or space-time engineering. These are not new in even mainstream physics, but it feels like they're sci-fi, and that's why it seems very difficult to try to engage people about these devices, inventions, experiments, etc.
And it can be very difficult because typically when you're discussing a technical topic with somebody, both parties have some basis of understanding that they both understand the other one has, so that they can use the jargon, and they know what the jargon means without having to break down what each of the terms of the jargon means. They just innately know it because it's part of their field and their experience.
The common vernacular.
Right? Yeah, a common vernacular, exactly. So it's hard to get to a common vernacular with physics and electromagnetics. Well, firstly, when the picture has been so muddied for so many years, and secondly, when the real work has largely been ignored, forgotten, or fallen by the wayside, or actively suppressed. Whatever the case is, it almost doesn't matter anymore what the case is, because what needs to happen is for the patchwork to go away and the complete picture to emerge.
A new standard foundation for
Yes, a standard foundation by which these systems can be engineered
and taught.
Yes.
All right. So I think this was that our second part.
I think so.
Wonderful. All right.
Thank you.
Absolutely. High five. I think you did great. I think that was a very good introduction for a lot of people, and even for some more granular, technical, more advanced conversation that I'm probably not qualified to have with you. That was a lot of fun, though. Yeah, and it makes me absolutely want to understand more of the technical aspects, of course. But this is how I feel every time I talk or listen to Bob or Dave or anyone.
Well, so that's one thing that's interesting also, is to gain a new perspective based on new information. And a good example of that is the letter that Richard Feynman sent to Ken Shoulders in 1986, which I found from, hey, if you're out there, that researcher in Philadelphia who did all that stuff on Ken Shoulders, you rock.
EFH1 Observing the Anomaly on Reddit, I believe. And he published,
I've got to reach out to them.
They published, they posted a lot of their work, but they had published a part 1 after going to the physical archive, and then in an ebook of sorts on
Reddit, on
like military technologies or aerospace technologies on Reddit, or the link posted to Reddit. He had also published many more images than I found in that first part. So I wasn't able to locate yet additional posts on Shoulders, but in the ebook there are many more images. There's a description on the archive's website of the physical size of the archive. And there are apparently some contents that cannot be accessed for 4 more decades. So, which it was not Shoulders' it was not Ken's request. All of his work was intended to be open source. Anyway,
so yeah, I didn't even know that, and that just further bold underscores what we're saying here. How is it that some of Ken Shoulders' work is still not accessible to the public for another 4 decades, when, to our knowledge, none of it was ever classified because he did it all himself? How's that possible? So, I'd like to see about FOIA-ing the hell out of whoever, if it's the Philadelphia Academy of Sciences or whatever.
Science Institute, something like this.
Science Institute of Philadelphia. You guys better open up those records.
I don't remember how much of the actual portion it is, but it was a few items at least, if I remember correctly. But you/EFH1 Observing the Anomaly would be able to fill us in more, probably.
Yeah. So, but getting back to the letter.
Yes, the Feynman's letter. Deeply apologetic was Richard Feynman.
Yeah. So we don't know the pretext, but my high certainty guess of what the pretext was that Ken Shoulders presented his work on charge clusters to Richard Feynman in person. And Feynman rejected it out of hand, likely because he thought it would be impossible to stabilize large balls of electrons because of the what we think of as the well-known Coulomb limit, or the electrostatic repulsion limit, or the space charge limit. Well, it turns out that that's not a limit, and that changes everything. And so...
Does it represent some kind of point of reference, if not a limit? Or is it just an arbitrary misdirection, the Coulomb limit?
I think that the Coulomb limit only applies in a non-isotropic medium.
Okay. Those
that is a medium that has no structure. But as soon as you structure a part of the medium, things drastically change.
okay.
So this is what Richard Feynman said, essentially, when he wrote to Ken Shoulders, was that he independently found that it is possible to stabilize charge clusters by spinning them. And what you need to do is to spin them up to the point where the centripetal, the electrons from their perspective feel a centripetal force pulling them to the axis that counterbalances the centrifugal pseudo force. And Feynman didn't expressly say this, but I think he implied it, that the centripetal force would also counterbalance the Coulomb repulsion, and eventually there would be a point at which it would overcome the Coulomb repulsion, which would allow you to obtain electron densities in these structures that could be far in excess of what we're thinking of as the limit.
We'll pull up the letter maybe on screen at this point.
That'd be great.
Made a nice kind of contrast version, but we have the actual numbers that Feynman was talking about, or that Shoulders was talking about, and then that Feynman had been, as you said, educated on after the fact.
Yeah.
Before he wrote this extremely apologetic letter. It was very regretful. At the end of the letter, please accept my humble apology,
And he also mentioned
my own ignorance prevented me from learning about something very interesting or something like this.
The giant of quantum electrodynamics bowed to humble humble Dr. Shoulders and told him, "I'm sorry I brushed you off. You were right."
Yeah.
And by the way,
Shoulders,
I did some back of the envelope calculations, and I think this is a reasonable estimate, which is such a good confirmation. It's really extraordinary.
And Shoulders himself, the father of vacuum microelectronics or microelectronic screening, or the godfather of the phones we all have in our pockets, or what I'm recording this on. Historic letter, I think.
And then to add on top of that, he was also the inventor of the quadrupole mass spectrometer,
which we currently still use for identifying elements.
Yes, elements and compounds.
Yes, and that was, and he did all this before he started working on EVO.